folks, I'm Dan Brown from a sort of interesting life.com. You're joining me on board good old Narrowboat Tilly for the Narrowboat Diaries, and in this episode we're going to take a look at a shorter period of time than previous episodes and focus on two of the best days of mid-January, where we actually even had some dry weather for a moment, but it didn't last long, of course. Anyway, let's start off with a fantastic day that saw boating, kayaking, biking and a very wet walk to end it with. Right, let's get stuck into the Narrowboat Diaries. This is the 15th of January that you're joining me for here, and as you can see there's hailstones all still frozen on top of the kayak there on the roof, so it was definitely a cold day despite how the weather changed. And of course by the time I'd moored up after maybe a 5 to 10 minute boat trip, it immediately started raining, and you can see just on the left there that I hadn't even tidied the rope up properly before running inside and getting a little bit cozier. But in the usual way, or at least in the way the weather's been in recent times, of course we've had a freezing morning to wake up on, then a downpour, and then a beautiful blue sky. So I took this as one of the rare opportunities to get out in the kayak of recent times and actually do it in the dry. And despite the cold weather, it was fantastic to just travel down only a short distance just to get to the Pont Cysylltu aqueduct. And as you're about to see, what an experience it is. On a boat it's fantastic, but then to do it on a kayak, oh my goodness me, peering over the edge there on the left hand side, it's not necessarily something that is for everybody, I'd say that much. But again, just doing this in, well, you can see there's all sorts of, like, I assume that's frozen hailstones still there on the football pitch. And if we are very quick now, as the camera looks up, you'll see snow on the tops of the hills in the distance there. But again, what a great way to start the day. Get some boating in, just a short trip, like I say, just to get a little bit closer to a car park to meet up with people later on. But ultimately, being able to just, well, hop in a kayak and start paddling, and in no time be down here travelling over to the Trevor Basin. I mean, just doing all this in the sun on one of the very few moments of sunny weather was a real treat. And it only got better when I hopped on my bike after returning back to Tilly and then travelled down the road from Pont Cysylltu to Llangollen. It's not a huge trip, only about maybe 5 miles tops, I would say, but being able to see and just pull up at the side of the road and get on the path and take a moment to just enjoy this amazing blue sky above these snow-covered hilltops. Just saw the ruins of Dinisbran Castle on the top there, and of course actually getting down to Llangollen itself, where the River Dee runs through. And because of all the rain we've had over the last few months, the river is so high here. Normally there's loads of rocks all over the surface here, but they're just totally underwater. And again, what a brilliant way to spend the day. Boating, kayaking and biking. And this is the bridge in the centre of Llangollen. Again, another iconic place locally that people from all over the place come out here for the day, and the canal runs up that you'll see in just a second, and you've got this beautiful bridge over the river. Great stuff. And you can see the canal is definitely closed at this point. Under the bridge just up at Llangollen, it's totally emptied out, as you can see there. And again, I mean, I love places like this, and this is another one of those famous little buildings on the canal at Llangollen, being the sort of ultimate day trip place. But then, of course, I had to head back up to Tilly, and doing this again in the afternoon with the sun behind you, or at least at the side of you a lot of the time, I suppose, and just going down this totally empty canal with barely any boats on it. A lot of that's down to the fact that there's very few places to moor, and just being able to have this sort of environment practically to yourself, whether you're on a bike, a kayak or a boat. You can see here just how slippy it was when I had to cross over the canal on a little footbridge, and had I have biked straight up onto that, then it would not have ended well at all. And I decided on the way back to not go over Pont Cysylltu aqueduct, but rather than face meeting somebody as I walked my bike across and then having to pass on the really thin path and hold my bike out over the canal, decided to just go down the road bridge and over on just this much shorter bridge here and have this beautiful view back up to the aqueduct. I mean, how fantastic is that once again on such a brilliant day? So of course I travelled back up to Tilly, and Well, as you can see, with no introduction, the rain returned and needed absolutely no encouragement, and it didn't really stop for the rest of the day, unfortunately. So as I was inside and deciding I needed some bread and some random supplies, I, in the end, just thought, let's just brave it. It can't be this bad weather for too much longer. So in the evening, you can see here, I went out over Punkasuffley Aqueduct up to Trevor to get a few supplies from the shop there, some knickknacks crisps I'm a huge fan of, and that there you're looking down onto is the unpleasant side of Punkasuffley, the sewage works, which is very unfortunately placed. So you can see there that in just one single day we racked up the boat trip, the kayak trip, the bike trip, and then the extremely wet walk to get a few supplies from the shops, which even just going on a supply run involved walking across Punkasuffley Aqueduct, a World Heritage Site. How fantastic is that? And again, that's what I love about being able to move around on the canal, that you can change to all these different routes, that if you want to get into town or go to work, go to meet friends, or just get some supplies from the nearest shop, you can throw in these incredible little places and routes that you actually travel to these different locations. Anyway, as you can imagine from seeing that last Punkasuffley shot, by the time I'd walked up into the little village and then walked back down to Tilly, I was absolutely soaked, and it's not even funny again to say just how wet I was and just how wet I have been so consistently when doing little trips like that, because the weather, even though you've just seen that beautiful sun and the kayaking and the bike ride, it literally started with rain on that day and ended with rain on that day. And in just a second you're about to see another perfect example of exactly that, waking up to see a beautiful, well, I'm not even going to talk about it, I'm just going to show you right now. Again, imagine waking up to this and seeing this beautiful sky reflected on the canal and thinking this is going to be a great day. And yet, of course, within a couple of hours, once the sun was up properly, it was grey skies and pouring down once again, which definitely made for a great trip getting on my bike to head into town, as you can imagine. So as we approached my traditional working weekend, I decided that I would head into town for work and then stop at my mum's house in the nights between my work days, basically, rather than go into town before work, out of town after work and back in the next morning and so on, which is what I normally do and what I've done on much greater distances than the trip from Punkasuffley area into Oswestry, which I'd say on a bike is probably about 8 to 10 miles, maybe slightly further, depends on the route you go, and there's a lot of factors that play into that. And the reason that this time I decided to actually stop in town rather than at my friend's house like I would do very often if I've got Tilly out miles and miles away, that's just not a realistic commute to work by bicycle, I decided to stop in town basically because of the extremely bad weather that was just constantly happening, and also because only about a week or so before, if that, on the first day that we'd actually had any proper cold, real icy, frosty winter weather, I literally spent about 30 seconds on my bike on that day before, well, just basically totally falling off my bike in proper fashion. Not at high speed, luckily, but in terms of I was going onto some ice, realised just as it was too late, the bike went one way, I went down on the ground the other way, and it was all very unpleasant. But luckily nothing broken, and nothing broken in my backpack either, because that could have been expensive. But in the next episode you'll see that there was something very expensive happened, unfortunately, in recent times. But to get back on track, I decided I'd stop in town for this particular weekend just because of how unbelievably bad the weather was. And it's like on Christmas Day, for example, it was the first Christmas since having Tilly that I actually stopped in town as well, because it's just been such, well, unbelievable weather, not only in terms of rainfall, but gales and just all sorts of things that you don't want to be cycling in or even boating in, really. And again, boating in the wind is worse than almost any other condition, apart from maybe ice, I suppose. Anyway, we're getting well off topic, but let's just see a few clips from in town. So my friends, for any of you who've ever wondered what I get up to when I stop in town between the nights that I'm in work of the days of, if that's an actual sentence, basically it's a lot of wandering around, and my goodness me, it's a very chilly night to be doing it tonight. We've had snow and frost and ice in the morning and over the day, so basically we're all wrapped up warm, as you can probably tell, just having a stretch of the legs, and then I'll get back to my mum's house, do a load of YouTube bits and pieces and boring sort of sit down jobs that needs like time taken to make new images and stuff like that, and really get something useful done, I suppose, for once in my life. It's just a great place to wander around, I suppose, especially on these calm, quiet nights with all of these old buildings and the churches lit up and just hundreds and hundreds of years worth of history just there in silence around you. It's great, especially if I'm wandering off to meet my friend on the other side of town and stuff like that, but ultimately I try and get some useful internet stuff done while I'm in town. So once work was done with, me and my friend hopped on a bus, got out to Cefn Mara, and then I think it was maybe about a 3-mile walk or so, maybe not that far, back to Tilly from there. Once again, walking across Punkus the aqueduct, to then immediately get on the boat and boat across the aqueduct too. And let's just take a look at my ridiculous camera and tripod setup to get a slightly different angle on the aqueduct crossing. Right, let's go. So then, what's this mount all about? Well, we've got an iPod sellotaped to a tripod, then a bike lock attached to the tripod, which is attached to another bike lock, which is then weighed down so that the whole thing doesn't topple overboard by a bag of coal. And as you can see, it led to this ridiculous camera mount situation to get a slightly different angle on the aqueduct crossing. But again, just ignore that and just enjoy this video, just this little clip here of crossing over an aqueduct on a canal over a river in this beautiful valley. And again, I mean, it's just fantastic, even on the day that was grey and overcast with a bit of drizzle. I mean, it's just everything that's good about boat life once again, and so rural and beautiful as well. But this boat trip is about to get absolutely ridiculous, and you'll see why in just a second. But basically, as we were travelling along, I could smell a little bit of burning, and it was difficult to say where it was actually from. So this is what happened. Basically, we could smell this burning smell, couldn't tell whether it was coming from Tilly or just in the air from, say, someone burning rubbish on a farm or something like that. So, pulled Tilly over to the side of the canal. My friend held her still on the towpath. Well, I got the deck boards up and went in and had a look, and there was no sign that it was actually coming from Tilly, but at the same time, it's very difficult to really judge that sort of thing. So, there were some walkers going past who I looked up out of the engine bay and said, "Oh, sorry, this is a random question, but is the air in general a bit plasticky smelling, or is it just us who's on fire?" And their answer didn't really solve anything, I've got to be honest. So me and my friend had the decision to make then whether we were going to carry on up to we had to carry on at least up to the next turning point. And as between the Trevor Basin and Llangollen, there's only one small stretch of actual moorings, because the towpath is pretty solidly built and it's got proper stone edging, so you can't use mooring chains or anything like that, and you'd have to get out in a lot of places and get a mallet to drive the mooring pins in, which we weren't particularly fond of doing, especially on such a narrow canal where it could easily be a nuisance on many places. So we either had to go to the turning point and turn around and head back down to the Trevor Basin, and hopefully it wasn't Tilly that was burning, or we could carry on straight up to this mooring point and basically then be facing up towards Llangollen. So then we, because of the narrow canal, have to at some point go all the way up to Llangollen to turn around and then come back down. Or what we ended up doing, which was probably the most difficult, time-consuming and awkward thing to do, we basically took Tilly up to the turning point, and, well, I'll show you with just a couple of photos, as it wasn't really the time for filming. So, of course, we got to the turning point, turned Tilly around, but then, in a ridiculous moment of poor inspiration, decided to walk Tilly backwards, holding onto the side and onto ropes, all the way for almost 3/4 of a mile upstream against the flow of the canal to these temporary moorings, as basically that was the nearest place we could get to with the least strain on the engine by literally doing it this way, as you can see. And it seemed an awful long way, I can tell you, dragging a boat backwards with no power, especially when we got to this last part here and had to get onto the boat and put the engine in reverse and just angle ourselves all the way down past the boat without scratching the boat, and then without crushing the actual little miniature boat that was being towed behind the bigger boat. So yeah, that made for a nice calm trip. As you can imagine, once we'd finally moored up, we basically both just went inside and spent about 2 hours just talking and generally relaxing and resting our hands that from the cold and holding onto the ropes and that and dragging for the best part of an hour, you get that sort of horrible seizing up of your fingers start to set in. But luckily, it was all well that ended well, I suppose, and a good story and a good bit of fun at the time, apart from when we got it grounded a couple of times. But we'll move on from that and pretend that it didn't happen. Anyway, I suppose really then you're thinking, well, that's a nice end to your day, but of course it doesn't end there, as I then had to walk back down to the bus stop with my friend, because obviously he needed to get home, and also I was meeting my dad to go and watch Star Wars. So ultimately that was a beautiful end, but definitely not the most restful day that I've ever had on the canal. And I suppose we'll just cut to one last little clip of me talking at the very end of that day and just really summing up how great boating is and all the rest of it, I suppose. Well, it's been an absolutely awesome day. Loads of great boating fun for hours upon hours to do the shortest of trips. And I've just been to see Star Wars with my dad. That was brilliant. And now it's something to 11. I'm back on board, and I made sure that I thought well ahead. And you can't actually see. Oh yeah, you can. I made sure to leave my bed set up so it's just come straight in, got the fire lit, and away we go. Oh, right. Night night, everyone. As it's got continually darker in these bits to camera that I've been recording while putting this video together, I suppose I'll take this as a moment to wrap things up. Thank you so much for watching, and please do check out episode 3 when that comes out very shortly, as you're going to see a lot of beautiful scenery and general boat life in more simple day-to-day boat life and getting things done on board, and hopefully that'll be of some interest to somebody. Maybe you've even seen a bit of beautiful sunny scenery in the screen somewhere around me. Anyway, I'll say the usual things. Thank you so much for watching. Please do check out my other videos and subscribe if you haven't already. There's literally hundreds of canal and boating videos on this channel. Please do also consider checking out my short boat life books for the Kindle. You'll find links to those in the description below. Just have an absolutely fantastic day. Keep it boat worthy, and of course, farewell.